We're live.
Hey guys.
How's it going? It's been so long since we've seen you, our adoring fans, which I think if you include the post-fight show and you include the podcast and you include the broadcast, we have 3 episodes in the span of roughly 72 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it'd be 48 hours from when we recorded it.
Considering I'm in all of those consecutively, I think we're doing pretty good.
Not too bad. So we're finally hitting the big leagues, gang. We have fan submissions, fan questions, and I would be remiss if I did not first and foremost address Justin Golightly, who I promised I would read his message verbatim. I asked him what he had to say about MMA this week, and he said, quote, "Talk about how Nate Diaz is actually Batman. Those two crooked motherfuckers are Dana White, and how Conor McGregor is Bane. Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz are both misunderstood vigilantes who are in battle with each other, but both have higher ideals in that they are at war with the crooked way the world and the bureaucrats work. In the end, Batman beats Bane, but with the help of Catwoman, who represents Lady Fate. I just wrote your whole show. Should you PayPal my 10%? Question mark?
Yeah.
I told him that I would pay him, and I have every intention to do so with overtime value bucks, which are not worth as much as the paper you'll print them on, so you're pretty much just throwing the money away. Should you so desire to get your hands on some overtime MMA value bucks, you just let me know. DM me on Twitter. I will send you the overtime MMA value buck. Moving on. Well, I guess we'll take that as a question.
Right.
I mean, the question, only question in there was, should we pay him 10%? But we'll just say the question really is that a proper analogy?
Right. That's kind of interesting. So I'm trying to think of how it was said again. Basically, they're misinterpreted people.
I think what he was getting at was that they're both anti-establishment.
Right.
They're against each other, but their odds are somewhat the same in the end because,
they're both there to get money. They're both there to get paid.
Nate Diaz saying, "Hey, I'm not fighting on UFC 200 unless I'm fighting Conor McGregor." You could almost see the look on Dana White's face when he goes like, "Et tu not a?" Which is a reference to Julius Caesar, where he looked kind of betrayed that Nate Diaz was like, "No, I'm not fighting anyone else." So now they're kind of pit against the UFC in similar interest.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. Yeah, I mean, that's actually a pretty good analogy then. I would agree.
Yeah. It's not bad. I've seen better, but I've also seen worse. So keep it up, Justin Golightly. We had some other friend comments, people saying what we should talk about is really who's next for Mighty Mouse. We kind of talked about that on the podcast, but when it comes to the broadcast, we usually do like the more news and those kinds of things. The frustrating part about Mighty Mouse is that there's just nobody outside of the UFC whose name I know at flyweight that I'd be like, oh yeah, we could bring him in as the fun new talent or anything like that. It's not as though there's a Fedor at flyweight besides Demetrius Johnson.
CM Punk.
If he could get that low, that'd be a good place for him. Rey Mysterio. Now that's a cruiserweight fight.
Well, I mean, we're in the broadcast area area, I should say, of the recording, so we can technically throw out those hypothetical. And
so who wins in the fight?
Right, Rey Mysterio or
well, let's
DJ,
go. No, because we got to give the size disadvantage. So we're gonna say Philip K. Brooks versus Demetrius Johnson. Who wins in the fight? The mightiest of mice versus the CMest of punks.
Right. I would lean towards DJ just because it's essentially a mastery game planner. You know what I mean? And it's something that he would use the quickness and superiority in every aspect of the MMA game.
Really? That's the funny part is at the end of it all, he just gets to look at CM Punk across the cage and be like, I've really done this a few times. Like,
right.
Welcome to my Carnival of Souls, Mr. Punk. I will be your host for this evening. And then CM Punk, if I was CM Punk, what I would probably do is keep one of the little razor blades in like my glove or whatever.
Right.
So you know how they do the gig line in pro wrestling, but I would just hurl it at Demetrius Johnson, because even that little razor blade is kind of like a giant sword, like a broadsword when you're DJ's side, and maybe it'll scare him away. I don't know. I cannot think of a way that CM Punk wins, given what I've seen of him online. I mean, his mitt work was pretty rough, and obviously that was old, and obviously you want people to see like. That's why on Embedded they always tell you to turn off the camera, because they want people to see the stuff that's unpredictable.
Right, exactly.
But I don't think there's a treasure trove of footage that makes CM Punk look like a world beater.
I mean, essentially the only person that makes sense on this is going to be Dominic Cruz. That is the only person that makes sense. And like we said on the podcast, I believe the only way I would see that happen, or I would like to see it happen, would be at a catchweight. And not for a title. It would just essentially be like hey, we're pitting the top guy on this weight and top guy on this weight, and we're going to meet in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Our friends over at the MMA Boxing Talk, which you can follow on, not Instagram, you can follow them on Twitter, MMA Boxing Talk, and go on their YouTube channel. You could subscribe. Cool dude all around. He asked, who would you prefer in the 200 main event, Jones versus DC or Conor versus Nate? And he admits that's not the most original question,
right.
But I mean, we've kind of addressed it in a roundabout way, but we never actually expressly said DC versus Jon Jones is the fight I want to see. It's the fight people deserve to see. It has the merit and it has the intrigue, whereas Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz never made sense. And I don't know.
Essentially the Conor show.
Yeah. Why are people so fucking heartbroken about this? It doesn't make any sense to me. Nobody wanted that fight. He didn't deserve that fight. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't help anybody's career. And yet people are like, oh, that's not fair, Dana. No, what's not fair is that this company spent $10 million to promote, and because he was being a prima donna and masquerading things, and, you want to know something that's really not fair? Paddy Holohan had to announce his retirement today because he has a rare blood disease.
And nobody is getting any... he's not getting any reaction of that because everybody's talking about Conor McGregor.
Yeah, they're ignoring his real retirement for Conor's fake ploy of a retirement. This dude has a type of hemophilia that apparently affects 1 out of 5 million people, and that, my friend, that's what unfairness is, because all of his whole career is overshadowed by Conor McGregor doing a publicity stunt to get a fight he never deserved in the first place, that he squandered. I mean, you have guys like Don Fry has come out and support Conor, saying that fighters should be in the gym. Frank Shamrock has come out and support Conor McGregor. I don't know if Frank's the best person to ask, though, because Frank's kind of just anti-UFC, whatever. It could be like curing AIDS, and Frank would be like, but the UFC is a conglomerate, and they're not looking out for fighters' interests, so I'm just not for it. But I think you can see my point. We have this in Conor McGregor. We have the boy who cried wolf. And it's like when he announced today, Monday, that I'm back on UFC 200.
Thanks, Dana White. Yeah.
Hashtag respect. That's actually disrespect. You just made a material misrepresentation.
Right.
And if I honestly think that there is probably a code of conduct that would apply to that if you're
essentially throwing Dana White and everybody else under the bus and have them step up and say stuff when they had no reason to in the first place, and go out and be like, hey, none of this is true. I don't even know why I'm even saying this.
Yeah, why do I have to answer to you? Why am I having to do this?
Oh, because of a stupid tweet that Conor McGregor came out with earlier today.
Which is just, it's nonsense. It's not fair. He made a lie is what he did, and now the UFC is somewhat suffering because of it. I just don't agree with it as a concept. But this is a situation. Now I don't think that there's credence to anything that Conor McGregor says. When he posts something like this, it's the boy who cried wolf.
Right.
This today was the point where the levee broke, where I looked at it, I was like, no, this can't be true. Womp womp. And then I realized that it wasn't, and I was totally okay with the situation, but I did not get flabbergasted. But then I also didn't get flabbergasted at the idea of him being retired either, because I just never expected it to be true.
Right.
I feel bad for Ariel Helwani, who tried to find justification with the João Carvalho dying and those kinds of things, only to have John Kavanaugh say on his show, yeah, it was all just a ploy. We were just having fun to try and get a reaction. It's like, okay, so that's the whole thing. The drama that goes around it is what makes it almost so infuriating, because you have people dying, you have these tragedies, you have,
and you're trying to make sense of it all, and essentially there was no sense to it whatsoever.
It's flippancy, and I just don't agree with it. So yeah, I really want to see DC versus Jon Jones. I liked the lead up to the first fight. I think that this one would be even better, because now DC, you know, even though he can't keep up verbally, doesn't have to keep up verbally. He can just go, I have a belt, blah blah,
right,
and move on. But I mean, it's just so funny to me to see Jon Jones get the better of DC in every situation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And something as simple as flipping off DC as he walks out of the octagon, brilliant.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. My dad once described a guy who he went to high school with. He was like, he was just one of those guys that was just so good at everything, you just hated him. Well, imagine that guy then flipping you off, right? Because it seems like Jon Jones is a younger version of DC. I mean, he's younger, more accomplished. You know, DC never got a gold medal or anything like that. You know, Jon Jones defended his title 8 times.
He's also like a crazy specimen of a fighter with his reach, and you know, I mean, like everything about him.
Yeah, and he's 10 years younger, so he gets 10 more years of a career.
Right.
He's everything that DC should want to be. I mean, he generates more interest in creating and deleting a tweet than DC gets being on his best behavior, giving this very insightful analysis on Fox. Sorry, bro. You have just established that you will not be as popular as Jon Jones, and nobody is going to be impressed by it. It's fascinating to me to see, and you can see it gets the better of DC every freaking time. So, long story short, that's what we're thinking. Also, we had the question of who makes sense for GSP's return fight. Would it be Lawler? Would it be Nate Diaz? Maybe the Condit rematch?
And give it. You know what? Even though we were threatened multiple times by the Diaz brothers or Diaz brother, give it to Nick Diaz and George St. Pierre, both coming off lengthy time away from the octagon. Have a little rematch.
I think that it would be kind of fun. I think
that'd be fun. I mean, I feel like it would showcase GSP's ability to come back into the octagon. But I mean, yeah, it'd be kind of interesting.
What did you say? Rematch?
Right. GSP and Nick Diaz.
Nick
right?
Diaz, but not Nate Diaz.
Yeah. No, I said Nick Diaz.
Yeah. I was just making sure because the name's in my head sometimes.
Right.
But yeah, I think that why would you blow your wad on Nate? Blow your wad on Nick. I mean, that's the one who you want to see. Nate, it doesn't make any sense for Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz, I mean, GSP has said in the past that he, could make 155. And so I think if it was at a 155 or 160 catch weight, then it makes sense. But Nate isn't a welterweight.
No. Fight a true, guy at his weight class. And I feel like Nick Diaz, it's a good opportunity for him to get back into the graces of the UFC. Mm-hmm. Fighting somebody like George St. Pierre, it's also a good payday.
Yeah, it's the closest payday he's going to get to Conor McGregor.
Right, exactly.
Because let's face it, if he faces the champion at his own weight class, he's certainly not going to get that press. That guy's fighting on fucking Fight Pass.
Right.
And then him fighting Robbie Lawler, I'm just not comfortable with. I just think,
we won't even touch that.
No, I'm not happy with this as a concept. It's no good. We had other questions talking about the GOAT. Okay. We've kind of already gone after that. One that we touched on that I was very keen on was the Anthony Pettis, this being his 3rd straight loss. What we didn't talk about is who we'd want to see him fight next.
Who we'd want to see Anthony Pettis fight next? Huh. That's interesting. Yeah, let's check out rankings and see what's up.
So we're pulling up the rankings now. I had that up as a tab, and then I took it down because I was like, shit, I'm not going to need that. And then I totally needed it.
Okay.
I said this on the post-fight show where I thought he should fight Michael Johnson.
That's right.
See, I've already answered this.
Yeah,
if you were better fans, you would know.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Johnson coming off the loss from Nate Diaz, but still looking relatively good in the fight. I mean, he got outschooled by Nate Diaz pretty heavily, but you're talking about a guy that just schooled McGregor. So, I mean, I would give the nod to Johnson.
Hell yeah, and I think that is a fight that would be pretty rough for him. If you go further down the list, like Dustin Poirier, Ally Quinta, Bobby Green, all 3 of those guys.
Those guys are all stacked.
Yeah, they're the type of guys who will implement a game plan. They won't care if they get booed. They will smother you. They will smear you into the fucking canvas. And then you got an Anthony Pettis on a 4-fight losing streak, and then he's 5-5 in the UFC. Right. Not a good day.
Right. You know what would be really funny though is is somehow how the UFC works when it comes to making these fights. And they're just like, huh, Anthony Pettis, Nurmagomedov, why not?
Just cannon fodder, really. I honestly think that a dehydrated, malnourished Khabib Nurmagomedov mid-Ramadan could beat the ever-loving shit out of Anthony Pettis after what I saw at UFC 197. It's getting to the point where I'm looking at this top 15, and I go all the way down to Evan Dunham as a guy who I think that Anthony Pettis could beat. And even that, I'm kind of worried about because Dunham's like a gritty dude. It's to the point where I'm kind of looking down at featherweight going like, hey, featherweight, you guys looking pretty good.
Right. I mean, it's something to think about.
It's a reinventing. I mean, what do guys classically do when they're on a skid? They reinvent themselves.
Let's see. Let's look at featherweight. All right.
Yair Rodriguez. That would be a great fight.
Absolutely. Yair Rodriguez.
Flying roundhouse kick of doom.
Although, I mean, I feel like Bermudez and Stevens would give him shit.
Oh, God. Yeah. It's a murderer's row there. I even think that, like Cub Swanson, he just came back. He's already number 6 again.
Right.
That would be an awesome fight.
He bumped up, did he not?
Yeah, pretty substantially. And there's a bunch of guys down there. Max Holloway, that'd be a fun fight. I don't know if Anthony Pettis is physically able to do it, but honestly, that's the smart play if you can, in my opinion.
Like you said, reinvent yourself.
But also, he's already been a champ at 155, so he can masquerade it as I'm trying to be a 2-division champ, not I'm desperate to not lose my job.
Right, exactly.
So that's Anthony Pettis, hey bro, I know you listen to the show and subscribe, so you should probably just let us know. People are saying that oh, this is an interesting one that we got from Sammy. I don't want to pronounce that. I've never said it out loud. He's one of our best followers on Twitter, and his comments. Sammy, man, spell it phonetically next time. I promise I'll say it correctly. But he gave credence to a conspiracy theory that's going out that Jose Aldo pulls out of every fight. So the idea being that the UFC or the powers that be will encourage Jose Aldo to pull out of this fight.
So it'll be
Conor McGregor goes right up in there.
McGregor, Edgar.
Do you think that's possible?
That would be really interesting, although it goes against my idea of McGregor announcing the Aldo
I don't think
fight, but
I am inclined to agree with Frankie Edgar. I don't think that Conor McGregor ever fights at 145 again. Especially after this fiasco. I mean, it's just he clearly doesn't want to make the weight. He's clearly way bigger than he used to be. He's bigger now than he even was when he fought Nate Diaz. You can see it, like when you can see a guy's muscle definition through a sweater with a rainbow and a bird on it. Yeah, he's a pretty big dude.
He's definitely bulked up a lot.
So I just don't think he has any incentive to. And what was DC saying about Jon Jones? Like, oh, he's puffy now. That's the new Jon Jones. Like, if this is the new Jon Jones, I'm not afraid of this man. Whatever. You can say it can be said with Conor McGregor, and you have a lightning fast Frankie Edgar who can put you on your ass anytime he so desires. My friend, I really don't. You see how Conor McGregor likes to play the game.
Right.
I don't think that he's going to fall into that trap. I think there's a lot of finagling he can do before he gets it. I think very likely what's going to happen, Nate Diaz, Conor McGregor, UFC 201. They need to build that card up so you don't have a huge drop-off in pay-per-views.
Right.
They've stacked all of them leading up to 200. They're going to want to stack the rest of them. This helps the UFC.
And then that way, both of them are essentially still within range of having that fight camp, and everybody's on board. It's not like they're like having like a long period in between. Like, okay, I was ready to go at 200, and now I have to wait a couple UFCs before I get my next shot.
No. And also, if you keep Conor that active and he fights Nate Diaz, if he wins, ideally, you have Frankie Edgar could possibly win. They could fight at Madison Square Garden. I know that the UFC said they wouldn't do that for Frankie, but they wouldn't do it for Conor, but they might do it for Frankie.
Fuck that. I feel like if Nate Diaz loses a second time, they should have a rubber match. Fuck that. Why the fuck does McGregor get an instant rematch and Nate Diaz does not?
That's the thing we talked about is like if Nate Diaz had lost the first fight, then he would never have gotten a rematch. It would be done. It's only because you get the Conor McGregor treatment. The only time I think that they have a rubber match, or I guess it would be a third fight, would be if Conor lost the second time. I could see in 2 or 3 years him coming back again.
Although, if Conor McGregor wins the second time, goes down to 155 or 145 and loses the belt, then goes and fights Nate Diaz for a third time.
Possibly. I think my huge thing is Conor wants this whole 2-division thing. I get it. It's cute, but you don't need to hold them both simultaneously.
No.
Vacate. You clearly don't want to be there. You're not.
And it's also unfair to everybody else.
It truly is. And it's very frustrating to us as fans, especially when you're as big a fan of Frankie Edgar as I am, to see, okay, cool.
You a fan of Frankie Edgar?
What? I dare say I might have a proclivity to the answer. But, yeah, so that's kind of a roundabout analysis, but I think you get our point. I think it'd be cool if that was like the story, because nothing would make me happier than to see Frankie Edgar be that third title, the second title fight, adding the third title fight. Because if you looked at that commercial that went before that press conference, it said 3 title fights. And I don't know if they were just stacking their deck in a case of Daniel Cormier and Jon Jones, but here's a fun thing too. Daniel Cormier was in Las Vegas. Jon Jones was in Las Vegas. Do you think that they recorded those segments of the commercial? I really think they did. You have both guys there. That's the fight you want to make just in case.
It's definitely something that's interesting to think about.
The worst thing that happens is you have 20 minutes of footage that you then just don't put into anything.
Right.
But the best case scenario, you don't miss out on the $10 million photo shoot that you would set up that some prick Irishman in Iceland was too good for. I think that's what would happen, but I could be wrong. Now, let's move on. Talk a little bit of other junk. Other junk being, what? Okay, when I say junk, what comes to your mind?
Dicks.
Waterworld.
Completely off.
Yeah.
Okay.
Kevin Costner thinks that MMA should be an Olympic sport, and since I get all of my political views and my value system from Kevin Costner, do you agree with the sage one? The man who played Robin Hood with an American accent. Is this the guy who we take our notes from?
No, absolutely not. I mean, it's cool to hear, I guess, get a little bit more mainstream as far as what actors think, which really means nothing when it comes to the MMA world. But I mean, I guess it's cool. It would seem so strange reading the headline. Yeah. Like I was telling you earlier.
On multiple websites.
Right. Like I was telling you earlier, it almost seems like somebody pulled out like a random name generator and then just like chose the random button over and over again to make a sentence. You know,
like those magnets you can get for your fridge where it's a bunch of words. Somebody just took a handful and was like, fuck your fridge. And then somebody walked up 20 minutes later, scratching their belly like, wait, what?
Kevin Costner supports MMA in the Olympics?
Also, dog muffin scissor fart? Right.
Yeah.
It makes about as much sense as the second sentence.
It really doesn't make sense.
But anyway, talking about MMA in the Olympics, do you think that MMA would be good in the Olympics, or do you think that it would fall victim like boxing does in the Olympics, where it becomes this weird scoring thing that's not that entertaining?
I mean, it's interesting with the Olympics because essentially it's breaking down the whole like country versus country thing. And I mean, the UFC has been very successful in the past. So, I mean, who knows? It would be cool. Like, I feel like Brazilians would just destroy everybody. But I mean,
truly, I'd like to see some like jiu-jitsu and like
I guess within the smaller different categories,
and then build
it. Right.
Because I feel like establishing a familiarity, a one-topic focus, and like for example, jiu-jitsu has a scoring system that works for jiu-jitsu.
There's judo. Judo is in the Olympics. Yeah. I mean, so you could essentially go from there.
But my point is, people are already critical of the scoring systems on one discipline.
Right.
We are constantly frustrated by scoring decisions in MMA. So just imagine that with some scoring system that's done on an arbitrary Olympic commission.
Right.
I think that establishing the smaller sports first, getting those in, having a good scoring criteria, and then using that as a base for it, that's just what makes sense to me.
Yeah,
but my big concern would be that we'd be sitting there watching and go like, wait, who? Because there have been times where I've legit, like I think it was the Francis Carmont, Lorenz Larkin fight. They were fighting in Brazil, I believe. I might be wrong. And I remember thinking that the decision was so off that the judges had to be racist and were just confused as to which black guy they were talking about.
Well, I mean, and that's gotta. It almost seems like they would have to have like a Bellator tournament style who's who that gets into the actual Olympics in the first place. Because I mean, it's along with everything else, it's all of the tournaments that you do and where you're placed and how many points you have and you qualify for, and it's like a long drawn out process. So I mean, I guess it would essentially be organizations outside the UFC and or Bellator where they would put on tournaments. I don't know if it's through USA Wrestling or.
We had a fan comment in, the Olympics were trying to get rid of wrestling, so it's not likely they'd put in MMA.
Well, see, the thing with the wrestling, though, is it's very one-sided when it comes to people saying, oh, well, it was very boring to watch. And they tried to change it up with, like, different rules and formats, but it's always going to be the wrestling. It's low scoring, this and that. Essentially, I mean, I guess it's the same thing when it comes to, like, jiu-jitsu. Well, no, not jiu-jitsu, but like with the Eddie Bravo Invitational, where it came to going into the overtime and essentially winning by that 1 point or that one escape or this or that. So I feel like wrestling's a little different just because it's so focused on one aspect of it. You know what I mean?
That's what I mean with MMA. There's so many faculties that can go into it.
Right.
Plus, I mean, let's talk about MMA. We're entering an era of CTE. I mean, when boxing was first created, there was no CTE. And so people talking about brain damage and all this, and you're going to have to wear the special headgear, which is going to limit people's movement. You're going to wear shin guards. And it's going to be very odd to see because if you look at boxing, I mean, they wear the crotch girdle and everything is big. So that the idea being that you could fight multiple times in that tournament system in a short succession. What happened when we started off with MMA? How many alternates got their glorious moment in the UFC because somebody
else got injured
who won broke their hand or something like that.
Right.
And
that's
so
interesting.
I don't think that MMA truly lends itself to it. I understand it as a concept, wanting it there, but really, I think that it would be such a bastardized product. I wouldn't like it.
Right. It would definitely need some polishing. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it would ever hit that level of competition. I don't want to say level of competition that it's a higher competition than itself, but there's just, like you said, there's just so much dissecting of the sport that it almost just makes it unwatchable.
Yeah. So moving on, single discipline sports, we had Bellator Kickboxing debuted this last week. We touched on it briefly on the post-fight show for no reason whatsoever. And then I wanted to talk about that compared to Glory. I think both products were fine. I think that it was funny because Bellator Kickboxing felt like a Glory event. If you hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known in a lot of ways, which is, I think, as good a compliment as I can give.
Yeah, as I say, that's a pretty good compliment.
Yeah, like same thing with Eddie Bravo Invitational, how you just slide in there with the familiarity, good production value. It was a solid card.
And it's one thing it seems like with Bellator and the kickboxing is essentially it's almost like it's just a step in the right direction because they're taking baby steps every single time they're having their kickboxing. Like the first time that they had the kickboxing simultaneously with the MMA,
the Dynamite,
and it was just like, it seems like there's way too much going on. Like, I'm not sure, like, if I really like it, this or that. And then they did some tweaking, and it seems like they're understanding different aspects of it, and they're making it better.
Yeah, and the Bellator Dynamite show, they're doing another one, and it's just like, nah. Like you put they put Paul Daly in the first one, who isn't a kickboxer anymore. He's an MMA guy. Put the best kickboxer you can.
Right.
And I'm worried that they're going to be trying to traverse this line where guys like Joe Schilling, Melvin Manhoff, these guys are doing both. I don't want that. I don't want the Swiss Army knife.
Right.
I want the precision, laser-guided, perfect tool for this one job, not the I apply to everything scenario. So that's my one concern.
And then it also brings to the point of, okay, so say somebody's doing a really stellar job in kickboxing, but they're not so great in the MMA aspect of it. How do you rank them when it comes to bringing up upcoming fights? Do you just stop throwing the MMA fights to them because you're like, well, the guy isn't doing dick, so I'm just going to keep on throwing some kickboxing at him. And how does that necessarily make them feel as far as an athlete that wants to pursue both? Well, shit. I mean, if I want to do MMA and kickboxing at the same time, and yet I'm doing a little better at kickboxing. I guess maybe one would just generally gravitate towards the one they're doing better at. But
look at Dustin Jacoby. He started out in MMA, and now he's doing very well as a kickboxer. One thing that I would even add as far as analysis goes, kickboxing and MMA clearly have different audiences.
Right.
Much to our chagrin, this is a bro as fuck sport. You still have guys with the metal militia and the big truck and the tiny dicks, and they're all over the place, just pounding science.
Very, very different than kickboxing.
Right?
Very
you have
different.
a more European savvy crowd.
It's people that actually, I don't want to say, I'm not talking shit on MMA fans, but it almost seems like people that actually grasp the sport a little more when it comes to kickboxing.
Slightly more sophisticated.
Right.
Because you can't just have a lowest common denominator where you're like, oh, that's violent. Ground and pound.
Oh, yeah.
Knees. No shit, he's going to throw a knee, bro. But anyway, I digress. My point being, if you were one of those guys traversing that minefield, you really need to consider your audience and then take those kinds of things into account. I don't think that those guys are going to do it, which is another example as to why I don't want guys traversing the fence. I don't want them being in both. I get especially under the Bellator banner where they try and do it to both, but it doesn't make sense to me. And I think that they would be hurting themselves both in their athletic career and also their financial income, which is a completely different aside.
I'd say the only thing that comes to mind when it comes to a reason why they would want to do both is if financially it made sense.
Mm-hmm. So unless you guys have any last minute questions, I think we're done for the Overtime MMA broadcast for the week. Please, throughout the week, if something comes to your mind, direct message us at OTMMA Podcast at Twitter. You could do it on Instagram, otmmapodcast@gmail.com. Go to our Facebook, subscribe to this fucking thing that you're watching. Anything else?
No, other than I mean it's great seeing some interaction while we're doing the podcast and or broadcast. If you have any questions or if you want to throw anything at us, it's great to see you guys respond. I mean, it's better than all of the Instagram fake accounts liking all of our stuff.
Yes. Fake accounts typically don't give thought-provoking material to analyze on a broadcast. If you ever want free stickers or silly merchandise and shit like that,
we will send you the fuck out of them.
And I will pay for postage through my law firm because I kind of a big deal. I shit you not. I one time was sending tax documents and I go to my secretary and I was like, hey, I don't have a stamp. And she was like, what? Like I was scum. I was so stupid for being like wanting to volunteer my 41 cents or whatever. She's like, you don't need a stamp. You work here. And I was like, oh, right. Sorry about that. I'll just go fuck myself. Secretary of the Year award goes. I'm not going to say her name on the podcast, but it rhymes with